All right, so good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining us for this very special session, which marks the kickoff of National Cybersecurity Awareness Month and also the 10th anniversary here at the CERT. This is not only a celebration of a decade of service and resilience in defending Jamaica's digital space, but it is also a call to action as we look towards the future of cybersecurity. It is indeed a privilege to have you all here with us today as we welcome a distinguished guest to lead our first webinar under the theme, Building Digital Trust in Public Service. National Cybersecurity Awareness Month reminds us that, protecting our digital world is really a shared responsibility. And this topic is especially important because trust is the foundation of every successful digital service. Citizens must have confidence that their information is secure and that public services are reliable if we are to build a truly digital Jamaica. With that in mind, it is indeed my honor to introduce our distinguished guest speaker who will lead today's session. Lieutenant Colonel Godphey Sterling served in the Jamaica Defense Force for more than 24 years in a number of staff and command roles. During that time, he worked with the MITRE Corporation and U.S. Southern Command to create the Caribbean Information Sharing Network in 1998 and served as head of its technical working group until 2007. He also led and participated in project teams that were responsible for all major technology changes within the Jamaica Defense Force within 1998 and 2019. With more than 2 decades spent in various ICT and cyber-related roles, he is indeed a respected authority when it comes down to cybersecurity regionally and internationally. In the year 2020, he served as Deputy Managing Director of Operations at the state-owned Jamaica Urban Transit Company, where he transformed the company's technological base, revolutionizing the fleet management and dispatch portfolios, culminating in the creation of a technology-enabled bus operations center that ensured the company could move passengers with minimum challenges to cycle time, passenger lift, and reduction in deadheading. As the director here at the Cyber Incident Response Team Division in the Office of the Prime Minister, he has day-to-day responsibility for governance, risk, and compliance within Jamaica's cyber ecosystem. He also manages the National Security Operations Center and the Jamaica Cyber Incident Response Team, providing world-class vulnerability and crisis management as well as incident response. He and his team triage, categorize, refer, respond to, and document cyber incidents within Jamaica. Among his qualifications, Colonel Sterling holds certificates in cybersecurity from the U.S. Army War College, George Marshall Center for Security Studies, and Carnegie Mellon University, a diploma in systems automation from the U.S. Army Signal School, a bachelor's degree with honors in computer science from the University of Technology Jamaica, and master's degrees in defense studies from the Royal Military College of Canada, Master of Science degree in cybersecurity from Universidad Isabel I, Madrid, Spain. He also holds certifications from the IEE in the management of cybersecurity in the energy sector and from the United Nations in the transformation of digital government to smart government. An avid reader and sports enthusiast, he enjoys the outdoors as well as solitude and a good book. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome Lieutenant Colonel Godphey Sterling.
Hi, good morning all, and thank you, Ms. Adjigol, for Well, one of the better introductions I've had in some time. At this point, probably all I need to do is to say thank you all for coming and I'll take your questions. But the matter for which we're here is really one that has dogged many a developing countries. And that is the move from being a pastoral economy to a digitally enabled society. And today, what we really want to talk about is how do we build trust in the public sector? And while we're going to touch on some of the situations in the world, we're really going to anchor it back to Jamaica. And if I just get opportunity to share my screen, I will do that. Cybersecurity in Jamaica really represents for us one of those linchpins that really is going to be critical in how we foster the digital change that we have embarked upon. Please confirm you're seeing my screen in presentation mode.
We are seeing your screen.
All right, so having taken 5 minutes to do the introduction of one person, I am going to try to do a 6-month transitional course in 40 minutes. And essentially, if we start with this title slide, and you look at the graphic, it shows Singapore and it shows Jamaica. And one of the challenges that the Transformation Implementation Unit had when it started this process was that Jamaica has a lot of public bodies. The public sector is fairly large when compared to countries of a similar size. And within that large public sector is an underlying atmosphere of distrust. And so, what I hope to do in the next few minutes is really to try and break through that shell in such a way that we can appreciate and understand a little bit more about what really goes into trusting processes within a country that's trying to transition from a largely pastoral or mechanical type economy to one where the digital economy drives growth. And so what we will look at today is why trust matters. Why is it so important, particularly in Jamaica, where we have a significant deficit that is in some instances real, but in some instances it is just a perception. We're going to look at some of the global best practices and we're going to try to tie them back to Jamaica. We're going to look at some of the challenges that SIDS face, and Jamaica is a SID, notwithstanding how we're viewed globally. Then we're going to look at really the difference between digital and smart government and how we transition from one to the next. We're going to sort of cap it with a look at the role that the CERT division plays in all of this and how we can hopefully get there. So we can skip the next slide because Ms. Ajigal would have done a fairly good job. And, the critical thing here is that we continue to serve our country and to give back in a way that allows for things to happen. But where we are is at the Cyber Incident Response Team Division. And this division, though we do quite a bit of public education and awareness, appears to be really still shrouded in a lot of mystique. And many persons only hear about us in the eventuality of a cyber incident. We really want to change that. And we've been trying to do that for a number of years now, but we kind of keep preaching to the choir, and we really want to get some new converts. The Cyber Incident Response Team Division has a 12-point mandate, and that came out of the National Cybersecurity Strategy of 2015. And essentially what it does is lay out in a very coherent and stepwise manner what is required to allow the government to provide cybersecurity and facilitate cyber innovation and development within Jamaica. In order to facilitate that on a day-to-day basis, the National Security Operations Center for Cybersecurity really started in 2021, but achieved full operational capacity in 2022, and it operates with 8 lines of effort. If you look at the screen, the core ones there are really threat intelligence and analysis, early warning and detection, as well as that presence that allows for some level of reassurance of our cyber constituents so that we can say to them and deliver to them these services. And in practical sense, this is manifested in the actual operations that you will interface with mostly, which is breach data management. And this is something that we do on behalf of all our constituents. Malware analysis, we do that to get a better understanding of the threats that we're seeing, particularly those threats that are affecting digital resources in Jamaica. Cyber incident response is something we provide, as well as penetration testing. Now, this session is not about what we do, and so we will leave it there at that 30,000 foot look at the CERT as we move forward. But as Ms. Ajigal said, we are celebrating 10 years this year. And, for any organization to stick around in sometimes what is a very hostile climate for 10 years, and not just stick around, but to grow and expand in its ability to deliver on its mandate, and also in its respect that is garnered from peers and others within the ecosystem. It's a testament to the level of effort that successive governments have put into the Cyber Incident Response Team Division, and that the dedicated staff here have really sort of put in, those long hours, those difficult tasks, sometimes those difficult customers, because when you're in the middle of a cyber incident, you really don't want to hear the sort of stepwise actions that must be taken. But it really speaks to how we've been able to marshal our resources, apply them surgically, and to provide the biggest bang for buck or return on investment to the largest portion of our constituents. So really the catalyst for our creation was the mass website defacement that Jamaica suffered in 2013. And when we look at it, we really had no response. I recall I was a captain in our Information and Intelligence Operations Center at the time when the then State Minister with responsibility for cybersecurity in the Ministry of Technology came, Mr. Julian Robinson, and he was accompanied by the first director of the CERT, Dr. Munifia Hewling. And, while we could talk about the situation and while we could provide pathways to remediation, Jamaica had no response. And so through the Organization of American States, facilitated by the Uruguayan CERT, we were able to fix that. And so the genesis of cybersecurity as a purposeful activity within Jamaica would have been born in 2015 with the creation of the division and the promulgation of the National Cybersecurity Strategy. But over the years, we have been forced to retool. We have had to pivot with the onset of the pandemic. And in 2021, we got our own home at 36 Trafalgar, and we started our internal rationalization and the delivery of services for Jamaicans by Jamaicans based here in Jamaica. It was not easy, and the last 5 years have been significantly challenging for the team, but we've been able to really position ourselves for growth in a very sustainable way by future-proofing the technologies we have invested in, the staff, the human capital that we have here. I was corrected about the average age of our team, which is a low 24 years. And what it means is that as long as we can keep them interested and invested in Jamaica, the future for cybersecurity, certainly from the government side in Jamaica, is bright. For 2025, we've had a long and challenging half of year so far. And what it means is that for us, these 10 years are really testament to the resolute nature of Jamaicans when they become invested in a purpose. And to the team here at the CERT, I really must say thank you for the sacrifices you've made, the long hours, the sometimes not very patient leader that I can be, and delivering to Jamaica and Jamaicans one of the best set of services that exist within the digital space. So why does trust matter? And why should we really look at it in Jamaica in a very comprehensive way? One of the biggest challenges we have in Jamaica is that we have a lot of laws. We have laws with regulation to the substantive legislation, but the big challenge is compliance. And compliance really is sort of a factor of the enforcement bit, because a lot of times you really don't want to overregulate a sector, but you also need to ensure that there is compliance. And for many Jamaicans, if you're not enforcing the laws with sometimes punitive measures, there is really no compliance or very low compliance. And that is what we're hoping, that if we can improve the trust factor, sort of erode that trust deficit, if we treat it like the debt to GDP, and reduce it very steadily as our resources allow, as people change their mindset and their attitude towards compliance, etc., we will have a greater uptake of services. And in this digital age, if we can get better compliance, get greater uptake of the services that are available, particularly online, then we believe that will improve investor confidence. And we're not doing this in a vacuum. As the debt to GDP ratio decreases, it is trending towards what the international rating agencies will call investment grade economy. And that is when we hit 60%. We're currently around 64%-ish. And when we get to 60%, we're there. But that has to come with the level of trust in the digital space that exists within Jamaica. And so the challenges we have with this low trust, and sometimes it really isn't evident. People just talk about it anecdotally, that there is a big trust deficit with government, but when you really dig into it, you can't find it. The reforms that are being implemented, particularly through the digitization and the digital transformation projects, must get greater buy-in from not just the people pushing the initiatives, but those who are meant to implement these initiatives, as well as those who benefit from them. So it's okay to create digital services and to make other services available digitally. But if nobody's using them, then it becomes a challenge. And so that level of adoption of technology, the technology diffusion rate, must improve. We've done well. We're trending somewhere about 84% now, but we have to do better. And then we have crises. And the ability to respond to crises, to get back to some semblance of normal operations in the shortest possible time, is going to be critical. And that is really where we will start to see how resilient our digital economy can become. But our system is perfect. And when we look at it, we have cyber disruptions, cyber attacks, insider challenges, disruptions because of natural disasters, disruptions because of man-made issues. And so what these events tend to do is cause the public to become less trusting of the public and private sector and the services that they provide. So when you really want to get your money and the ATM is not working, you have a problem with the bank. That trust that your money is always available to you becomes impacted. When you want to access your tax facilities and the TAJ is offline, or in recent times we're treating with the issues at PICA, these things erode trust. And what we have to do as cybersecurity professionals first, but also as persons who are participants in this digital transformation, is to ensure that we shore up what we're doing, what we're responsible for, and put mitigations in place to ensure that we minimize the impact of these disruptions. Now, one of the things that we look at when we talk about trust, in 2015, 48 incidents were reported to the CERT. And one can understand, it was created on the 6th of July, and Cybersecurity Awareness Month was October. So we can understand that. But in 2018, there wasn't much of a difference, right? By the time we got to 2021, we were trending at about 200 incidents per year being reported. As of last year, we are just under 450. Now, persons might say, well, that's because there have been many more instances of cyber events. There are cyber crime, cyber incidents. Maybe because there isn't enough reported incidents for us to really measure whether or not what we're seeing is just a greater level of responsiveness in terms of people reporting these incidents, or it's actually more incidents happening. Based on the fact that the volume of data on the deep and dark web, as well as the levels of vulnerability, have not significantly changed, we are looking at the possibility that this is a direct result of persons becoming more knowledgeable of the CERT and what it does, and trusting the CERT to deliver some sort of a resolution to the challenges that they bring to us, as well as to give them guidance even if we can't resolve the issue. And I believe that is why between 2021 and 2024, we had such a steep rise. And for 2025, that trend has continued. So in terms of best practices, we have a couple here that we're going to go through. We can't go through all of them, but transparency is something that is really critical to how you drive building trust within a digital economy. And, in Jamaica, we're really trying to do that. We have the Access to Information Act. Now, there are good criticism and bad critique of it. And essentially what the unit has to do is just to continue to improve. But what is in place is a framework for every Jamaican to get information on something that is of importance to them. We've started open data initiatives, and there is an open data policy. But sometimes when you talk about it, you get the feel that we can do a bit more in terms of sensitizing, certainly the public sector, and more generally Jamaicans to the benefits of an open data policy in a technology-driven world. Service integration, such as the tax portal that TAJ manages, these things bring a level of efficiency and availability to Jamaicans that if we continue the trend, we will do well. The JAMPRO business registration through Do Business Jamaica and gov.jm, these portals provide always on access to employment and investment opportunities in Jamaica. But then we have to look at the tech enablers. NIDS rollout is going to be critical to our digital backbone as we continue to push that, because it will be supported by things like the public key infrastructure, which will ensure that there is that level of quality assured in how you're authenticated, identified, and the way you can access particularly government services using your national identification card. Our incident reporting portal has been refreshed, relaunched, and provides a more intuitive interface that allows you to in a single stop, report any incident having to do with the digital space, and you will get a response. There are quality of service assurances that come with that. Within the financial sector, we have CCJM, which is a trusted platform for financial practitioners to get together to share almost in a Chatham House rule fashion the incidents, the vulnerabilities, and be assured that within that trusted group, things will be dealt with and in a transparent and cooperative way. And that this sort of blame game, naming and shaming that we're sort of used to when it comes to cyber incident, it is not there. But then we must engage the citizens. And certainly the feedback mechanism that the ICT Authority, the Office of the Information Commissioner, and the CERT have online and by phone, as well as the ability to just engage in person, provides a critical building block to that trust factor that we're trying to achieve. And then we have the Data Protection Act, the Cyber Crimes Act, and the National Cybersecurity Strategy that provide the legal sort of grounding in terms of a legal and regulatory framework for what we're doing in the digital space. So when we look at the best practices, despite what you might want to say about Jamaica, we are not left behind. We're doing things to standard, we're doing things in a consistent and sustainable way so that you, our clients, our constituents, can benefit in an ever more efficient and innovative way. All of that, though, is not without challenges. And when we think about it, we will always have a question of resources, particularly financial resources, and the need to ensure that there is that balance that our legislators have to find in terms of what projects get what levels of resourcing and on what scale we can implement certain projects. Those are always going to be constraints. And so from budget cycle to budget cycle, things might not happen in the way we want, but it has to be sustained and it has to be carried through sometimes across administrations. Then we have to think about climate shocks. We saw what Beryl did. And for the southwestern end of the island, a lot of persons were without power and even cellular services for days. This had nothing to do with a cyber or a computer-related incident, but these natural disasters and sometimes man-made disasters, because when you look at it, a lot of the infrastructure for some of our telecom providers keep getting vandalized, and these are acts of man. And when they're vandalized, what it does is it creates challenges for digitally enabled services to be accessed. It creates challenges for persons to just get on with daily life. And so we have to really seek to bring those realities to the fore, sensitize people as to the challenges that these shocks can create within a digital economy, try to put redundancies in place, and to ensure that persons appreciate that these will happen, but that we have mechanisms in place to shorten the recovery time and to ensure that where possible, redundancies allow for automatic failover so that you don't get long periods of service disruption. There are gaps in terms of our cybersecurity coverage. We have a national cybersecurity strategy. We have a Cyber Crimes Act. But there are certain things that really, if we're going to depend on voluntary participation, it's going to take a while because we're going to have the challenge of persons just sticking to that notion that there's a trust deficit with government, and especially if the facilities involve law enforcement entities, then persons are going to be even more reluctant to voluntarily share. But what we're hoping to do with these gaps is to really treat with how the resources are apportioned. For those of you who are tuned in, you would realize that just last week, The Strengthening Cybersecurity in Jamaica project, which is being co-funded by the government of Jamaica and the Inter-American Development Bank, got full approval for implementation. And so that project over the next 5 years will seek to address a lot of the resourcing issues that people perceive or that are real with JCERT and the NSOC. And so what we find here, though, is that notwithstanding these gaps, Jamaica, since the treatment of cybersecurity began, has held on to being the top English-speaking country in the Caribbean when we consider the metrics that the Global Cybersecurity Index and the National Cybersecurity Index maintained by the Estonians use to measure cybersecurity maturity, growth, and functionality within a space. But we can't be comfortable there because even though we're holding on to it for the English-speaking Caribbean, we're still number 3 in the Caribbean and number 8 within the Latin America and Caribbean region. And so what this means is that we have a lot of work to do. So even though they've stopped putting a numeric rank to countries, we're in the middle and we need to now move towards the top of the pile. So we need to, within the next couple of years, move out of the middle tier where we are to tier 2. And the ultimate goal is tier 1, which is where we become a model for cybersecurity. The talent drain is not going to stop. Digital nomads are a thing that is just here today and they're here to stay. What we have to do is to lengthen that stop in Jamaica for our talent. And to do this, we have to create a sustainable talent pipeline, but a talent pipeline that delivers to market needs. And market needs here is not just what is required by the private sector. It is also what is required by the public sector to deliver on those goals that have been set to transform Jamaica from a digital society to a smart society. We have some vendors, particularly of security products, who continue to just push legacy systems. If you think back to when cellular technology was just sort of becoming mainstream in Jamaica, and we had the CDMA technology where one service provider would just not give it up. Everything was just based on that one level within the technology stack. And then the other came in and just leapfrogged them. And then we had healthy competition for a while. What we need to have in the cyber realm as we think about vendor lock-in and legacy systems is that same sort of competition where persons appreciate what the vendors are selling them, appreciate that they need to future proof their tech stack and to ensure that what they're putting in place can survive for at least 5-10 years when they invest, so they can get fair returns on investment. So as we seek to push from a digital government to a smart government around trust, we realize that largely where we are is in that first block, where we have a lot of forms online, we have some basic portals, but a lot of it is not really automated in the way that we would want to be appreciating service delivery and access now. The NIDS project and its corollaries will bring a level of integration to this setup, and that will ensure that through your national identification card and the infrastructure that supports it, payments and interoperability within government, etc., will become almost seamless. Then we have to look at how we orchestrate these life events. So we have to ensure that businesses in the private sector support the process and utilizes it for the collection, storage, portability of data, etc. We have to ensure that our pensioners that are, in some of the far-flung areas of the country can access the life certificate, for example, very easily online and are assured that when they actually do the online verification, it goes to the entity that is responsible for the disbursement of their pension. Learning was revolutionized with the pandemic, and that's one of the normals that have come out of the pandemic and is a good thing for us. And so we have to ensure that more and more persons who use our online education platforms are assured that their data is secure. Far too often in Jamaica, we have platforms that leak students' credentials. And, there's always the blame game, whether it's the owner of the platform, whether it's a student, whether it's a school, whose responsibility it is to remediate. We have to get beyond that, and we have to ensure that where necessary within the software development lifecycle, we implement those secure measures so that by the time we get to production stage, we have secure platforms, and then we have to implement them properly. We have to recognize that AI and MML are here to stay. We cannot think that large language modules are going to always remain rudimentary. They're getting faster. And yes, we're in the post-quantum era because quantum computing is here. While we don't need to concern ourselves with it too much, we have to look at what will come when quantum computing become more accessible. And so we have to rethink how we think about things like encryption and the algorithms that drive those. And finally, we have to get to the point where the concept of smart cities, a smart country, is realized, where a lot of the activities online are real-time or near real-time, where AI is used to ensure that there's a level of assurance without the sort of fear that biased data will create challenges. We have to become resilient, which means that when the shocks come, we're able to recover from them in a short space of time and sometimes to recover stronger. But it requires the participation of everybody. We cannot just have the select few who from time to time feel burnt out, feel burdened, because nobody else is really pulling their weight. Everybody has to participate. The users need to provide feedback. The custodians need to ensure that they do a good job. The developers need to ensure that security by design is something that is practiced every day, every step of the way. And so if we can do these things, then we find that that shift from just being a digital government where, you can access some forms and lines and you can use a basic portal to access basic services, gets transformed into the ability to live in a society where everything you require is available at the touch of a button. So for the next 12 months, certainly from the CERT division standpoint, there are some quick wins that we can really sort of shore up or introduce. We've seen where the passport, citizenship and immigration agency people have gone. We have the kiosks in the airport, we have the online renewal of passport, we have the C5 form, and these are all things that we have been able to touch and leverage, and they touch our lives. The sticker in renewing your license is a thing of the past. Great. The online renewal of birth certificates or application for birth certificates. These are things that are really sort of there and we can improve in the short term. We currently have a fortnightly engagement by JCERT and the NSOC, and we provide quarterly reports to the permanent secretary of our ministry. Those reports really can be sanitized and made public, and we intend to do that. We have looked at how the 24/7 vulnerability management and monitoring takes place. And while it does happen, we're still constrained by a 5-day work week. So the idea here is to change that paradigm where persons working at the CERT appreciates that there are 3 shifts, but each shift is really a regular work day. And whether you come to work at midnight or you leave at midnight, there are no considerations for overtime or double time because this is your workday. And that is something that has to really be driven into the minds of our young people to appreciate that. Mobile first. The power of mobile devices allows for this to become a reality. And within the diaspora, we have so much talent that if we can tap it, and bring it in a sustained and systematic way, we can improve on that trust deficit that people continue to say we have. We have a number of projects that are coming on board, driven by the IDB, the World Bank, and the OAS. And these are projects that not only come through loan funding, but they're grants that you can apply for, and you can push technology-based innovation to build resilience within the country using these pots of funds, which really are there for you to use and to appreciate. If we look at the local scenario, over $165 billion in contracts were approved last year, and not much of it was taken up. And so the teaching of entrepreneurs how to overcome the procurement hurdles to access these contracts is something that has started, and we hope will continue. And this, we believe, will also help the small enterprises to realize that you don't have to be a big company to access government contracts. And so we will continue to measure what we do. And the ultimate aim here is to have a national cyber authority that will be the umbrella governance framework set up for cyber within Jamaica that will drive the digital trust factor. The CERT will continue to monitor its ability to measure mean time to recovery, to help entities to keep their patches going, and to provide alerts and advisories. But then a lot of these things are really done in-house. And over time, we will start putting these dashboards on our website so you can see at a glance in your own time what's happening within cyberspace within Jamaica. Participation is critical. We've already spoken about the diaspora, but in Jamaica, we need our citizens to become more into what is happening with cyber, with trust, with digital transformation. You know, you said you wanted a strategy. We gave you one. You said you wanted the ability to implement that. We gave you the CERT. You said you wanted plans. I know we can share threat intelligence, or we can actually leverage the protection of critical infrastructure, how we can have a seamless and coordinated incident response framework. We gave you national plans. The Cyber Crimes Act doesn't treat with all the issues within cyberspace. We listened to you. We've done the research for the Cybersecurity Act. And in time, given the legislative agenda, we will give you a Cybersecurity Act. Digital exclusion is something that we recognize. And so we've taken to the communities. Working with the Ministry of National Security, we're bringing cybersecurity fora into the communities. We're not asking community members to come to us. We're going to them. We need layered defense. And that starts with the individual, who is oftentimes seen as the weakest link. But we need to empower that individual so that they become the first line of defense. And outside of the national SOC and those entities that maintain SOC and sell SOC as a service, we need to have more of these facilities across the different sectors of the economy. We have taken that into consideration. We were going to implement sectoral SOCs. And the BOJ FSC with respect to finance, eGov, well, JAMICTA with respect to the public service, we have started those conversations, and we're going to continue them and hopefully get there within a short space of time. Vendors, we have to be careful how we trust vendors, or we trust third-party suppliers, so that our security and the trust placed in us by our data subjects are not compromised. We have to avoid trust fatigue, eh? And that's one of the things. Whenever you talk about trust in Jamaica, the first thing you hear is that there's a big trust deficit. We have to get beyond that, and we have to start testing that assertion, and where it doesn't exist, we have to make it known. So as we move towards a smart government, these are the real challenges that we face. Proactive services, but we need to do so with the necessary consultation so we have citizens buying. Real-time performance management. You know, we've been talking about that for some time. A trusted data ecosystem. Yes, the DPA was promulgated, and you know, it it is being implemented by the OIC, but the pace probably needs to be picked up and the resourcing needs to happen. And then the government needs to become really much more networked, much more seamless in how it operates. And the gov services by JAMICTA are really meant to drive that. GovCloud, GovNet, the national CUG framework and the national telephone framework about that. The use of the data center for JAMICTA's, well, to create a government cloud is probably something we want to consider. So the next steps, we have created a newsletter, which is currently being distributed to a limited number of persons who have subscribed to our mailing list. But what we will do is push that out. We're going to ramp up our cyber diplomacy sessions. We have to do some tweaking here, but essentially the principle is approved by the permanent secretary, and those will be pushed out. The fortnightly orchestra meetings by JSER, we probably need to open that up a bit. The invitations are out and you can join. And there are briefings that we provide on a weekly basis to the permanent secretaries of the Ministry of National Security and OPM. We must, however, strengthen the levels of cooperation and collaboration between the OPM, where the CERT sits, and the Ministry of National Security, as well as the other key players within the sector, JAMICTA, BOJ, the FSC, the OUR. We need to stop operating in silos because what it does, it confuses our constituents and they continue to ask themselves, well, who really is leading on what? And who do I go to with what challenges? Well, the situation as it stands within the cyber ecosystem is that the CERT leads with respect to cybersecurity, the MNS through its agencies with respect to cyber defense and law enforcement, and everything else is subordinate to those two constructs as we treat with trust in the digital space. So essentially, ladies and gentlemen, we've looked at why trust matters. And we've looked at it from a Jamaican standpoint, because a lot of times we trust the anecdotes and we listen to or get caught up in the noise, particularly in social media. And the real truth, the real substance of what we're meant to be doing gets lost. Jamaica, as a small island developing state, have challenges, but we're trying to overcome them. The government agencies are doing their part, and the other participants, the other practitioners within the ecosystem really need to step up. The time for talking is long gone. Now is really the time for action. So as we continue to refine the roadmap and to measure and show what the metrics are saying, there are a number of steps that we're certainly going to undertake to build trust with you, our constituents. And hopefully that will serve as a catalyst for a greater revolution within the public sector that will see Jamaicans at home and abroad having greater faith in the assurances of a seamless, sustainable, and always available provision of services through digital technology. Thank you for your time, and I will take any questions you may have.
All right. So we do have one question in the chat. So Miss Stacy Ann Carty, she said, "Good day, sirs. Thank you for your presentation. You spoke to the availability of grants. Are these available for the automation of business processes by government entities?"
So some of these grants that are available, particularly from international donor partners, are not necessarily going to be available to individual government entities. And such an application would have to go through your central ministry with cabinet's approval, etc. But for a lot of the grants that are available out there, it's really for entrepreneurs, individuals, small, micro, medium-sized businesses within the space, not necessarily government agencies. For government entities, you're really meant to work through your central ministries to ensure that you leverage the public purse from a capital or a recurrent standpoint to implement these initiatives within your particular entity.
All right, Miss Cartier, I hope that answered your question. Are there any other questions for Colonel Sterling? All right, yes. So we have another question, and this is coming from Mr. McCullough. His question is, based on your experience, do you believe most organizations are reporting cyber incidents? If so, what percentage would you estimate?
Well, I think Mr. McCullough has asked and answered the question himself, but thank you for the question. No, I believe we still have a significant challenge with reporting. I believe the reporting is very low, and for some sectors, there is actually no reporting that's taking place. This is a significant challenge, and the call to action is really that if you don't report it, we can't necessarily fit it into the national picture. Because while we might see the vulnerabilities and we might see that the vulnerabilities are being exploited, one, because of how internet service is provided, where a lot of times the IP address resolves to an internet service provider as opposed to a third-party subscriber, it doesn't necessarily give a true picture of what is happening with the individual entity or person that is being impacted. What we do recognize is that based on the levels of breach data, the levels of vulnerability, and the levels of reported incidents, there is a significant deficit in terms of what incidents are reported and what are not.
All right, so we have another question, and this question is coming from Mr. Philip Lewis, and he's asking, who do we contact for support as an entity in the event of a cyber incident?
So the Jamaica Cyber Incident Response Team is the national incident response capability for government. So any cyber incident that occurs, whether you are able to categorize it or you're just able to contain it, you can report to the Cyber Incident Response Team division. Through a triage process, we will be able to determine whether or not the threshold for a cybercrime has been met. If that threshold has been met, then the matter will be properly documented and handed over to law enforcement with the concurrence and participation of the affected entity or individual. If a crime has not been met, then the Cyber Incident Response Team Division, through either the JCERT or the NSOC, will assist with the remediation of the situation that exists.
All right, so we have another question in the chat, and this is coming from Mr. Michael Rose, and his question is the government leading towards or recommending any particular GRC tool regarding data protection?
Data protection really is not with respect to a GRC tool, but the OIC, the Office of the Information Commissioner, the Data Protection Act lent heavily on the Council of Europe Convention. We commonly call it the Budapest Convention. It also leveraged facilities out of the NIST framework and other recognized frameworks globally. And so the 8 standards of the Data Protection Act 2020 represent the core set of guidelines for treating with data protection within Jamaica. What the challenge may be at this point is that with respect to some of the regulations that must be implemented with the substantive legislation, there has been sort of a gap between the date that the Data Protection Act came into force and what they're able to do today. But certainly the legislation, the substantive legislation, is comprehensive enough. and neutral enough for the regulations to speak to any eventuality that may occur with respect to data collection, data storage, and data destruction.
All right, I hope that answered your question. Are there any other questions for Colonel Sterling? No? Oh, well, yes, we do have another question. All right, so Mr. Kirk Smith is asking what can be done, therefore, to increase responses apart from persuasion, which apparently is done now.
So when you think about responses, I am going to take it that you're talking about persons reporting incidents as opposed to incident response being mounted. So you can clarify that in the chat if it's not how you intended the question to be interpreted. When we talk about reporting incidents, if you think about how a community operates, and let us say that you live in a gated community and one of those houses was broken into and the homeowner said nothing. The homeowner would have seen where the burglar came from, how the burglar got in, what the burglar took, and how the burglar left. It says nothing to the managers of the facility or to his neighbors or her neighbors. And then a second house gets broken into by the same burglar with the same modus operandi, the same what we would call tactics, techniques, and procedures. Then what you have is a community which is now vulnerable to that sort of attack all the time because nobody really, A, knows that it is happening, B, knows how it is being done, and C, can take the necessary preventative measures. So when we talk about reporting incidents, you might think it's a very simple incident because it's something that does not affect you significantly. But that simple incident may be that one missing piece that the Cyber Incident Response Team Division needs to complete a bigger picture of a bigger campaign against more valuable digital assets. And so by not reporting it, our picture remains incomplete. Whereas if you reported it, as insignificant as it may seem, it would allow us to complete the picture and to say to other like entities, this is happening, this is how they're doing it, this is what you need to look for in terms of fingerprinting your environment, in terms of looking for indicators of attack, in terms of shoring up your security. And by doing so, these entities that have not yet been compromised are able to mitigate A, the occurrence, and B, the impact if it does occur. But it also says to persons who use these entities, whether by using services or even visiting them or working in them, that we can trust that the network that we're interfacing with is relatively secure. So by reporting all incidents, it doesn't matter how simple it may seem, by overcoming the feeling that we are a victim and we need to not be seen as a victim. You know, when we talk about physical security, we have that informer for dead culture where, you know, you see but you not talk unless it affects you and you might deal with it yourself. But what that leads to is just more mayhem. And so within the cyber realm, within the digital space, what we're saying is if it occurs, whether it's a vulnerability that you've detected or a breach that you've discovered, share it with us. Be assured that the necessary sanitization, the necessary confidentiality is being applied to everything reported to us. And as such, you will ensure that you help to complete the national cybersecurity threat picture, which allows us to more clinically apply limited resources. Now, for those who may doubt that this is how it operates, you would have seen the CERT get called out time and again in social media for not saying things about situations which are unfolding. But the fact is that where people are responsive and where we're able to work with affected persons or entities, we have to ensure that we respect that right to privacy and that level of confidentiality. And so do not be afraid to be a victim, because the reality is that we're all going to become a victim, or we're all already a victim. Some of us just don't know it.
All right, so we actually have four additional questions, Colonel Sterling. I am not sure if you're available to take all four. You can just let me know, or you want to
Yeah.
take
So we'll take the questions that have been posed, and as the moderator, you
all right, so
control the time.
we'll take that. We'll take these last four questions. All right, so the first is coming from Miss Allison Allen, and she's asking define what is meant by crime pertaining to cybersecurity.
So a cybercrime is anything access to a device, manipulation of data stored in the device or the device itself, or the tampering with the availability of those devices that is not authorized. Now, when you think about it, that's the classic legal definition that we use. But a cybercrime can be anything from malicious communication to cardless fraud. It really is one of the reasons why we don't say that every cyber event is an incident and every incident is a crime, because the threshold for meeting a cyber crime is quite high, right? There has to be not just the occurrence of the event, but the intent to be malicious in perpetrating the event. So when we talk about threat actors, we talk about malicious actors, as opposed to the inadvertent issues that may occur from a careless employee, which would still be a cyber incident or a security incident, but not necessarily a crime. And so we have to be very careful when we talk about cybercrime, because there's a legal definition per the Cybercrimes Act of 2015. And then there are so many other incidents that are out there. But we also have to consider cyber-enabled crime, the use of technology to facilitate the commission of physical crimes or traditional crimes within our jurisdiction. And these are categorized differently. So when we think about it, if you are unable as the victim or the person suffering the inconvenience to determine what it is, report it as comprehensively as you can to us, and through a triage process, we will be able to determine whether it's a crime, an event, or an incident, and we will operate accordingly based on what we find.
All right, so the other question is, are there, any measures in place to audit public services to see if they are compliant or meeting some standards for security?
There is.
All right, so is there any statistical information related to success rate for resolving incidents reported? How effective is JACERT in assisting in resolving or overcoming these incidents or cyber attacks?
Our year-on-year success rate is over 85% in terms of the number of cases resolved that have been reported to us. We can't resolve what was never reported to us. And so that goes back to my statement earlier that we can't manage what we can't measure. Now, if you don't report the incident, we can't do anything about it. There are persons, including business entities, who will suffer a cyber disruption or a cyber incident or event, and they will take to social media and talk about it and not report it anywhere. When that happens, while in our monitoring for sentiment analysis, we might come upon it. And if it's deemed by us to be significant enough, we might lend some resources to look into it. It's not reported to us. And so we have a challenge in just dealing with social media reporting and solving of issues. And sometimes crowdsourcing helps. It does, because people are able to get advice from persons whom they seemingly trust. But for us, we boast upwards of an 85% rate year on year. And certainly for 2025, that is over 90%. Now, What does this mean? It means that rather than seeking to crowdsource your response or your solution, report it to the formal channels. The JCF is there where the cyber crimes have been committed. So is MOCA, so is the FID. And where it's just a cyber incident or event, the CERT is here. Additionally, there are third-party managed security service providers out there. The challenge that we face at the CERT is that when you report it to some of these third-party entities, they still don't report it to the CERT. They don't even encourage you or advise you to report it to the CERT. So our view of the national attack surface, the national issues with respect to cyber incidents is just a fraction in our estimation of the actual number of incidents that are out there. But to the substantive part of your question, that is what our success rate in terms of resolving issues is. And certainly, while it's not 100%, and given the fact that some incidents take longer than others to be resolved, at any point that you sample the data, I doubt you will ever get 100%.
Definitely. All right. So the last question is, are there any plans to audit and phase out legacy systems across government agencies?
So the way you phrase the question is interesting. Every single entity in government, as a director of management information systems, a director of ICT, a security officer for ICT, a chief information officer, somebody responsible for those systems. There are 283 government entities. If we were to take 1 day per week to audit an entity and working 5 days per week, there would not be enough days in the year when we take out weekends and public holidays to audit everybody. Directors of management information systems, IT directors in entities have a responsibility to ensure that their entity is functioning at the level it should. When you invest in a piece of hardware, it has a lifespan. So when you seek to specify a piece of hardware, you should take into account where in its life it is, how many viable years you're going to get from it, and ensure that your budget allows for the replacement in a timely fashion, a programmed fashion to make things happen. Now, there are issues that will come up. Some equipment will get to the point where because of the threats out there, you just can't keep using them anymore. And this is why audits take place. So where there is the need for audits, and that usually comes based on the vulnerabilities that we're seeing in terms of determining our priorities, we treat with those. Now, recall from previous presentations, there are 4 priorities of response that the CERT has. Priority 1 are those ministries, departments, and agencies that are critical to the continuation of governance, meaning if any one of them should be impacted in a significant way by a cyber incident, the whole matter of governing the country is threatened. And so that's our first priority. Priority 2 are ministries, departments, and agencies and private enterprise that own and operate critical or essential infrastructure or protected computers. Priority 3, all other MDAs and private sector organization, and priority 4, the individual. Now, while that is said, a particular incident at any of those levels may supersede the priority level of the entity above it because of the magnitude, the nature and impact of that incident. But the first line of audit is the audit team within your entity. The second is yourself as MIS directors and ICT directors. And the third is going to be the Auditor General and how they operate to get those done. Where we see high levels of vulnerabilities, we will arrange with those entities to conduct an audit. But for us to schedule the audit of more than 250 entities on an annual basis when we are not cognizant, we do not know what this age or state of their infrastructure is something that would be very difficult to achieve with our current resourcing and the level of cybersecurity, well, malicious cyber activity within the Jamaican ecosystem. So what we would say to you is this. If you think your infrastructure is in a state that requires an audit and you're unable to conduct that audit on your own, then we suggest that you let us know. We will assist where we can, but in terms of those scheduled audits, the first two levels of priority gets the first look, and secondly, the levels of vulnerability determine who else we audit.
All right, so unfortunately, we are unable to take any more questions because, we're a bit over time. But thank you, Colonel Sterling, for sharing those valuable insights. Your perspective on building digital trust in the public service. It really highlights the importance of keeping our data secure and ensuring reliable digital services for everyone. Thank you to everyone for your engagements and questions as well. Your participation is what make these sessions meaningful and help us all to understand how to build a stronger digital trust within the public service. So as we celebrate 10 years here at the CERT and observe NCAM, let's take the lessons from today and apply them in our daily work to create a safer, more secure digital environment for all. We look forward to having you join us in our upcoming sessions and continuing this important conversation. Follow us, of course, on social media at CIRT, that's CIRTGOVJM, to keep up with our upcoming events for the month. Thank you, everyone, for joining us, and do have a great rest of the day.